welcome to another episode of Adventures in Contracting. I am Leona Charles, CEO and President of SPC Business Consulting, where we do all things government contracts. And today we are going to talk about the September 30 DOT Disadvantaged Business Enterprise and Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. So, just a few housekeeping. If you're looking for us, you can find us at just about any social media platform you can imagine. At SPC Business Consulting, you'll find us on TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram. Let's go over the background of how we got to this memo, and then we will talk about the program, and then we'll talk about what this memo means in practical application to small businesses and minority businesses. So we got to this memo through previous litigation that occurred where they challenged the presumption of protected classes and how that works with the DBE program. Essentially, they were suggesting that the DBE program is racist and it is unfairly exclusionary to white men. So, what has happened in the past to get us here is there was a lawsuit lodged in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky, which basically said the program is unfair, it's discriminatory to white males, and there were three plaintiffs. So, to kind of bring us up to speed, on September 23rd of 2024, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky determined that the DBE's program use of race and sex-based presumptions likely does not comply with the Constitution's promise of equal protection under the law. So what does that mean? Well, the program was initially developed to provide protected classes, and those protected classes were defined as Black American, Hispanic American, Native American, Asian Pacific American, and Subcontinent Asian American, and of course, women as protected classes. Um, the presumption was that if you were a member of any of these classes, then you had an automatic social and economic disadvantage due to lack of access, historical racism, historical exclusion, and the inability to participate as other firms do, as other non-minority firms do. So in September of 2024, the district court held that those were likely unconstitutional presumptions. So on May 28th of 2025, the DOT, represented by the Department of Justice, along with the three initial plaintiffs in the initial case, reached a consent order. And a consent order is just a record of agreement which says, hey, we've agreed to a solution. This is what we want to do. And then it's submitted to the court, and the court will either approve it or reject it. So they framed the rationale as, we agree that having a presumptive program means that two similarly situated small business owners will face different standards for entering the program, and those differences are based solely on their race, ethnicity, or sex. So, in other words, they're saying everyone else is able to get into the program, but white men are somehow being rejected. We're not eligible to participate in the program, and that is discriminatory towards us. So on June 25th of 2025, the Solicitor General of the Speaker of the House, consistent with 28 USC 530D, advised the Speaker that the Department of Justice had concluded that the DBE program's presumptions violate the Constitution and that the DOJ would no longer be defending them in court, and that position would be taken on ongoing litigation too, which is this case. So they've summarily said, we agree that the presumptions are unconstitutional, so we're just not going to defend them anymore. So then they issued an interim rule removing the presumptions, and it's effective immediately. So what does that mean to small and minority businesses or businesses that have been certified previously or in the process of being certified? That means that as of right now, any certifications you currently have are null and void. On a case-by-case basis, they are going to be going through every certification and determining if the individual meets the criteria described in 49 CFR 2667. So what does that mean? So 2667 says that in order for you to qualify for this set aside, you have to prove that you have been economically and socially disadvantaged based on your personal experiences and circumstances that occurred that have nothing to do with sex or race. You have to submit a personal narrative that establishes the disadvantage based on a preponderance of evidence with individualized proof. So again, it has to be personal to you. It can't be that you're part of this protected class and the class as a whole in totality has experienced these things. It has to be that you personally or your business personally has experienced these hardships. Um, you have to have individualized proof of specific instances of economic hardship, systemic barriers, and denied opportunities that impeded your progress or success, either in education, employment, or business, including financing terms available to similarly situated non-disadvantaged people. You also have to state how and to what extent those impediments, they're calling them, caused you economic harm, which includes a full description of the type and magnitude that you experience and how it was relative to a similarly situated non-disadvantaged individual. And then you had to state how and to what extent the impediments caused the economic harm, including a full description of the type and magnitude, and attach a personal narrative, a current personal net worth statement, and any other financial information. And so they have said that each UCP application that you fill out for your local Department of Transportation to be MBE certified must apply these new certification standards immediately. So it also requires them to reevaluate all current DBEs and ACDBEs to recertify any that do not meet the standard. So I'm hoping that people that have, if you're 8A, you would have already undertaken an exercise very similar to this, where you had to describe how you were personally affected, and because it was race neutral and more on an economic basis, you had to describe how you were economically hit, and how that prevented your business from succeeding. So I think if you have an 8A certification, it seems that it will be less of a burden to kind of crosswalk your narrative there to work with these requirements. If you are not, and you're having to do this on your own, the key things to remember: it has to be individualized and personal to you, and it can't be a situation that occurred because of race or gender, which I'm not really sure how that is going to work. I think there are a couple of things to consider when kind of looking at this critically. One is that we know that women and minorities typically make less per dollar than white men, so that there's historical, there's precedent, there is anecdotal, there's all kinds of evidence to this. um we know that we know that we also know that minorities typically do not have the same level of access to capital. They don't have the same access to opportunities and potentials as non-minority businesses, but you are not allowed to use that. So what I think is going to come down from this, and I do think all hope is not lost, and I do think that the situation that's going to occur is not one that they calculated from. Because what I think we're going to see is just a shift to size standards, right? Which is basically what has been done in 8A, and what typically I think most jurisdictions were doing anyways with their DBE programs was removing the race and focusing more on size. And so I think what they hadn't anticipated is that it's going to become now a large versus small, and small businesses create the most jobs and have the most economic force, but have the least access to capital. And I think what they're going to find, in putting out this order, and I think they're gonna, it's kind of a gift to us accidentally, is we are now going to be able to show that these large businesses are being unfairly awarded work. we small businesses who are the main drivers of economic progress do not have access to the same things that they have access to. I think we're going to see that, and it's going to be an unintended consequence of this. I think that the basis of this, which is that it harms their Fifth Amendment right, doesn't really make a lot of sense because there's no crime. And the Fifth Amendment, as a refresher, is just, your right to remain silent and your right not to incriminate yourself. There's no crime to have to remain silent and to have to not incriminate yourself for. So I don't really understand how that is. Um, I don't understand how that's like solid legal footing. What crime are you worried about incriminating yourself for? But that is the standard that they're leaning on, and because they have a DOJ with this administration that is sympathetic to that stance, it's been decided that way. But I don't think that legally it is a sound argument. But that is the argument that they're standing on, and because the DOJ um, is running this right now, we don't have any option other than to comply until it's litigated fully. Like I said, I think leaning on size standards is going to be your best bet. Also, remembering that it is an individualized effect. So, you being in a protected class, we know that we don't have access. We know that we are denied credit more often. We know that we don't have access to the same opportunities. We know that we don't experience the same type of welcome and ability to bid and partner and all the things that you need to do to be successful in business. We don't often have the access to the primes to be able to do that. So it's going to hinge on us saying, hey, I am a small business. I see this other business who is in the same industry, roughly the same size, makes roughly, the same amount of revenue annually that I do. They have access to, these uh, Booz Allen, Lockheed. I don't have those, and this is how it's harmed me economically. And I think if we start framing things like that, then what happens is we get to start putting a magnifying glass on partnerships and a preferential treatment to particular small businesses. We know that there is a core group of small businesses that large businesses love to work with, and they don't open the doors for any other small businesses. And I think this ruling, or not this ruling, rather, I apologize, this memo actually presents us with some ammunition to put a spotlight on the preferential treatment of a small select group of small businesses that get to do business with large companies that leave the other
Any of
small
these things, at
businesses
least
out in the
according
cold.
to
So I don't
the
think that this has to be fatalistic. I do think that it is, for lack of a better term, I think it's a crappy argument. I think this is a BS rationale. I think it's a BS memo, and I think it is. Um, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I can't find any other professional word for it. I think it's ridiculous. But I think in putting it out, they've unintentionally handed us a gift. And that is a way for small businesses to emphatically show that large businesses do not include us. And maybe it will help us to secure an even bigger part of the contractual pie, because we can show without a doubt, not based on race, not based on gender, but just on size alone, we're not getting nearly as much work as they are. And maybe that's what needed to happen. I don't know, but I do think that this could potentially be a gift for us. I'd love to hear your comments, love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to send comments and thoughts my way. I'm happy to hear them. I'd love to see another perspective on it. And thanks for listening.